This podcast is brought to you by the Heldridge Hotel, New Brunswick's only 4-star hotel and a preferred hotel of Rutgers football fans. The Heldridge helps you make the most of your game day weekend, providing premium accommodations in the cultural heart of downtown New Brunswick. Restaurants, bars, theaters, parks, museums, and more are only steps away. Whether you're traveling alone or with a large group, book your stay at the Heldridge and make the most of your game day weekend. Visit theheldridge.com today.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politi and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Politi here, Lenny Fonseca. Gonna talk some basketball, and I don't want to say it's over, but the fat lady is warming up her vocal cords. The loss at Penn State just feels like one they had to have. And I get it. It was a nice little put together, nice couple wins, showed some like good, gritty basketball. But this is what we've talked about this all along now. The margin of error was gone for this team. A road win against, a mediocre Big Ten team at best would have at least got them to 4-4, get them to a chance, the position where they maybe can make some noise here late. Instead, just on the pile of losses that this team has had this year, where you're going to look back on and say, man, that's a game they should have won. That's a game they could have won. And it's just the same. I get it. Bad break with Dylan Harper, twisting his ankle early. He wasn't the same player. Clearly, that's part of what happened here, but it's basketball, right? It's the stuff that happens in basketball, Brian. And I just don't know. It just feels like this is the one that's you're just going to shrug. Okay, that's it.
One of many, right? It feels like it's one step forward, one step back every time anything happens, right? And it felt like if they had won this game, you'd have a 3-game win streak, you'd have back-to-back road wins, and you'd have an enormous opportunity to play a Big Ten title contender in Michigan State at a place that's going to be hugely pro-Rutgers, Madison Square Garden. Everyone's going to be hyped to play. And then you win that game. You're 5-4 in the Big Ten. You have 4 straight wins. Essentially, the entire non-conference is knocked out, and you're back in business. Like, you're back in the conversation. Instead, you go to Penn State. You shoot relatively well. Your best player scores 30 points on 15 freaking shots. 13 of 15. Unbelievable. Yeah. Unbelievable game from Ace Bailey. And we'll talk about the text later. But the fact is he scored 30 freaking points. And, you lose this game because one of the many reoccurring issues came back to bite them. They actually were decent on the glass, but they turned the ball over every time they went down the floor. And I know Penn State's good at turning the ball over. That doesn't mean you have to have a season-high 17, and some of them are just silly. Lathan Somerville inbounding the ball directly to a Penn State player. Jeremiah Williams dribbling it off his foot like 2 or 3 times, pounding the floor after one of them. Just, and it was so empty in that freaking arena. I heard every slap on the floor. It was in a freaking library, which is another thing. The place is completely empty. It's not like you're playing in a vicious road environment. I just think a couple of things. There's the funny cope from the few people remaining in the fan base and paying attention to the situation, who still think there's a chance they turn this around. After every game, it's like, just got to win 4 of the next 5. Eventually we're going to get to the season finale. It's going to be like, just got to win 8 of the last 1, like if we win the last 1 games. The reality is this. All the optimism that came from the Nebraska loss, from the Nebraska win, I should say, it's warranted, but if you really look at it, they needed a good game from Ace Bailey, a good game from Dylan Harper, a complete bounce back game from Zach Martini, who hit 3 of 4 threes, right? That's not sustainable. It's a nice story. It's not sustainable. And you needed Dylan Grant to continue to play even better every game, which, to his credit, he's been the revelation of the Big Ten schedule so far, but you can't depend on your 4th best freshman to elevate that much and be consistent. So yes, Dylan Harper getting hurt pretty much nuked their chances, but that is exhibit Z of this team needing its 2 best players to play at an A level for them to even really have a chance. They had, again, to wrap this point, a guy with 30 points on 15 shots, and they lost by 8 points.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
you make great points. I just wanted to say that it seemed that the way the lineup changed, right? The starting 4 freshmen, better defense, better rebounding. Like, you saw glimpses of what the team could actually be. It was a tough loss, no doubt. But it feels like, to me at least, they finally got to the point where, like, all right, this kind of actually looks like the team that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a silver lining or some sort of optimism, it's like, all right, we're here at this point. Obviously, you explained for all the reasons why, the fat lady's singing, no doubt about it. But there's at least like a glimmer of, all right, you could see it. They're at their last straw. They're grasped at it. Like the lineup's changing, but there was some like, all right, this kind of makes sense at least.
It's just too late. That's the problem. Like, I agree with you totally. It looks like the team it's supposed to be on some level, but it's just, all right, well, you squandered all those opportunities. And now I'm looking at the schedule. You need 9 wins in the final 12 games to get on the bubble. Like, not to, you're in, like, to get on the bubble. So you can't lose one. You can't, like, tell me where the 9 are. At Michigan State. Okay, let's just the Garden Magic. Yeah, okay. And you're not Northwestern. Okay, well, that should be one of the easier road games for you, but you've lost some easy road games. Then number 21 Michigan, number 17 Illinois, at Maryland, a terrible matchup. Iowa, a terrible matchup. At Oregon, one of the best teams in the league. At Washington, again, all right, that's one you should win, but it's on the road. Southern Cal.
There's
one you should win on the road. I'm just giving you that's the third easiest game on the schedule. USC at home, Minnesota at home, and the sandwich between at Michigan and at Purdue. I mean, it's just like you get 9 wins out of that. It'd be a miracle to get 6 wins out of that.
100%. Northwestern beat Illinois at home. Illinois is the second, if not the best team in the Big Ten, right? Like we cannot be saying they should win. They shouldn't win any of these games. They have not shown any level to where they're better than any of the team not named Minnesota, which beat Michigan, by the way, or USC, which beat Illinois, right? Like Rutgers is not shown to be better than any of these teams. And I think we are at a point that this is the reality. If they beat Michigan State, then you have a marquee win, right? And you have something to hang your hat on. And maybe you could convince yourself if they could beat Michigan State at the Garden, they can fight with anybody and win any game, right? And somehow they go on this crazy run where every 50-50 game goes their way. Fair enough. If they lose to Michigan State, then the reality that's in everyone's face will finally be so apparent you can't ignore it. This team's only chance of making the tournament is winning the Big Ten tournament, which they first have to qualify for, right? So if they lose to Michigan State, the goals are recalibrated to forget the NCAA tournament. Make the Big Ten tournament, hope that everyone kind of keeps getting better, hope that you peak at the right time in March, and hope that you make a miracle run. Because as much bargaining as we can all do and the coping and all the reasoning, maybe, this and that can happen, the reality is that none of it's happened to this point, right? All of a sudden, Zach Martini's not going to become a consistent 50% shooter on 3. Tyson Acuff, as back in the starting lineup, had that nice little spurt. He's just not going to become that sixth man scorer you were hoping for. Jeremiah Williams' regression is the reality now. That spurt he had was just a kind of, a little distraction from the fact he's been regressing. And they just don't have, outside of Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, they just don't have the horses. That is the reality. And I hate to say this on January 20th or whatever, there's still a month and a half left in the season. I just can't say, look at the situation and think anything other than that. They're going to need a miracle.
Yeah. And it's funny because you mentioned the 30 points from Ace and again, people are going to point out the technical foul, and it was a mistake. It's a freshman, 18-year-old immature guy. And if you saw the game late in the game, Rutgers making a comeback. He has this poster dunk. It's an incredible dunk. And it's like the perfect motif for this season because you see all the potential in him just slamming down this incredible dunk. And then he gets called for the technical foul. And the image for me that's going to stick, Pat, and the cameras give Peacock all the credit in the world. That's something that not a lot of people are saying, but the cameras caught this moment where Dylan Harper putting both hands on his head in like this agonizing look on his face, like he just knew it. It just knew it. And it's just that to me is like this potential, this moment, these two guys is great. And then, oh my God, agony as to what happened. And I feel bad for Ace, but that's what happen when you have 18-year-old kids in this position. Things like that are going to happen. Yeah,
that was the perfect on-camera moment. And then there was another one too when he was on the bench. Actually, Ace Bailey was on the bench, and the assistant coaches were, Smoke Williamson was kind of like lecturing him, like, "Listen, this just lost us the game, right? Like it was a play for as miraculous as it was, really swung the momentum right back to Penn State and changed the momentum there." So, it's crazy. It was a wild moment, and that gasp of Dylan Harper kind of just epitomized it all.
The tech was fair, I think. He got in the guy's face, he screamed.
Totally.
Absolutely. And Ace is the kind of guy who chirps all game. I mean, that's fine. I'm fine with the trash talk, but you kind of take it where it goes. I don't like the thought that Ace lost the game, right? Like, technically, the technical was a massive momentum swing, no doubt, and any chance of Rutgers coming back essentially died there. But the fact Rutgers was even in the game, was even fighting with Penn State, was because Ace Bailey was doing literally everything he humanly could do to. And I have to imagine that it has to be frustrating for a guy like that to score, again, 30 points on 15 shots, the greatest offensive display I've ever seen. Certainly the most efficient, right? Like, he went off against Indiana. That was impressive. This was just workmanlike, boom, 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 hitting open threes. The kid's shooting 40% on threes this season. Like, what else does he have to do? And, you do that and you look around and it's like, Dylan's hobbling around with a twisted ankle because he twisted his ankle in the first half. And that clearly just, knocked him out of the game, right? Like, he was there in spirit, but he was nowhere near able to do anything after that. And then no one else steps up. And, is what it. And the second technical was even more obvious, right? He kind of just shoves Ace Baldwin, who's a gnat. The guy's a gnat of a defender. I would just annoying you all freaking game. I'm sure Ace wanted to do that.
Great college player. Yep.
Yeah. He's just like, you know what? Get out of my face. I lost the game already anyway. Let's take the tech. But yes, it was an immature moment. Steve Pikiell calls it a teaching moment. Sure. But I have a hard time blaming the kid.
It'll help the Utah Jazz next year. Teaching moment when the Nets get him. I don't know. I'm just kind of at that point. And I hope, but I just see where this is going, where we're going to have this end of the season press conference and Dylan got the flu and he twisted his ankle. We're going to have all these excuses. And I just know it's coming. And I'm not buying what you're selling. This team's been like that all year. We're just a couple of bad breaks in the course of a basketball season with illness and injury. A good team overcomes that. This was not a good team. So that's how I feel about Aces. Dylan's ankle twist again affected this game, but it's basketball.
Yes. When you have his fellow 5-star scoring 30 points on 15 shots, which I keep repeating, you should be able to overcome that. The one thing I take away from this that's kind of been building, as the season's kind of gone off the rails, is that people aren't angry anymore. It's mid-January. People aren't angry that Rutgers loses anymore. They're just so apathetic. They're throwing up their hands and saying it is what it is, right? And we reached that point, a couple weeks ago, but it's still jarring to me. Like Rutgers basketball, the greatest season of all time, the best team, this and that. They're losing it on the road to Penn State in a winnable game, and people are just kind of going, what do you expect?
Totally. Yeah. All right. Is Michigan State a realistic? What has to happen to beat this? Is that the best team in the Big Ten, number one? And number two, what has to happen for Rutgers to beat them?
I think Illinois is more talented, certainly. Mm-hmm. I think Michigan State is more a veteran. They've had a lot of guys, playing in that program for a long time. You have Tom Izzo, and when they play in East Lansing, oh boy, they have that Big Ten whistle, and that certainly helps. If you guys watch the Illinois game, that unbelievable. But anyway, they're certainly a top 2 or 3 team. They're not a great shooting team, believe it or not. They're horrible shooting threes. They dominate the glass. They swallow teams up on the offensive boards, and that's why they're so efficient offensively, because they take, they miss 3 shots in a row, but the fourth one goes in on the same possession. What does Rutgers have to do? Control the glass, control the ball in transition. It's just the Tom Izzo team. They push the ball, control them, and hope and pray to God that Dylan Harper's ankle is miraculously healed, that Ace Bailey, instead of 30 points on 13 of 15, scores 40 points on 20 of 20, and that Dylan Harper goes for 25 points on 13 to 15 as well.
That's the biggest thing for me, Pat. That Ace is not going to be able to. Michigan State's defense is not going to allow that. They're a well-coached defensive team. They will make Ace Bailey the priority, and they will limit his opportunities. Certainly,
right.
That's.
It comes down to coaching and philosophy, and that's when Rutgers needs a counter. What's Rutgers' counter to this issue or problem or being outcoached or what Brian said first and foremost is the most important thing, right? Rutgers has been better defensively, better at rebounding, but you're facing a team that makes its mark on those things and plays with a veteran presence. And when you're trying to overcome things like that, you can't rely on a streaky shooter or anything like that. It's going to take a total team effort. And just, again, that hasn't been there once this season, right? It's just something different every game. And that's what's lacking most. So, is it realistic? You look at the records and it doesn't appear that way, but it just feels like with this team at Rutgers, and you just don't know what you're going to get. And that's why maybe there's some mystery or intrigue to this team, because it's well, They can go out and shock Michigan State, and they can lose to Kennesaw State. And I think that's the point where some Rutgers fans are at. Like, we have all this talent, and maybe they can put it together. But the point that you made before, right, where it's January 22nd, and here we are. So,
in all seriousness, Dylan Harper has shined when the moment's been brightest. He was terrific in Las Vegas, right? There's going to be a lot of attention on this game. National TV, CBS, the Mecca, scouts for probably every team, even European teams, Australian teams, everyone and their mother is going to come to this game. That's a big stage. You would think you get a good Dylan Harper game. Another thing, the Big Ten whistle, I do joke about it. This is a Rutgers home game, even though it's at Madison Square Garden. You're going to need some of that home cooking. Like, you're just going to need it, and you're going to hope that Tom Izzo factor doesn't play in. And you're going to need somebody step up. A Zach Martini 3 of 4 game on threes would be enormous. A Dylan Grant's 15-point game would be enormous. They need somebody to kind of have that. And then you got to hope that Michigan State has an off day, which is certainly possible, but a lot of things have to go right, essentially, for them to win this game.
Right. All right. We'll be back to recap that after the game. We got to talk some gymnastics report. We've been waiting for this to see what finally happens here on this story. That's been one of the bigger stories of the year from Rutgers. It's been ongoing for 4 months now. We've been talking about the report. We finally got the report. And I need to go on like a 60-second rant about this, just in case, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't care about gymnastics. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to tell you why this matters, right? Because you're a university that you send your daughters to this school, your sons and daughters, you trust them to take care of them. And this is what happened to these gymnasts. I just want to drill down on the process here. All the safeguards. This report exposed just how flawed the university's process was in protecting these athletes. And it starts with this. The gymnastics are unhappy, right? What do? They think it's a toxic thing. The coach is bullying. They go to the coach first. Well, the coach is not going to help you. Of course, she disagrees. She's trying to get out of the program. Okay, your next step, right? Your next step is the sports administrator. You think, okay, that's the liaison between the athletic department and your team. If that would be who you would go to next for help. This is a person named Mike Zuhl, right, who had not served as a sports administrator in his prior 6 years at Rutgers. His hire was called surprising from a personality fit perspective, and he was hired as a request from the coach. And oh, by the way, he had his own shitstorm a few years ago. Dealing with an employee, just a bad person to have in that job. That's your second step. If you think you're going to get help, if you're a gymnast, your third step. Well, I can't go to the sports administrator. Let me go to the AD. Well, the AD's having an affair with your coach. Lo and behold, you confront them about it. He lies to your face about it. That's the next person you go to, right? And this report, I mean, it doesn't say it's a romantic relationship. I don't care. The gymnast knows. We know what's happening. She wouldn't answer questions about it. He wouldn't answer questions about it. It's over. They were having an affair, period. Right? That's it. So the gymnast knew this. You can't go to him. So what do you do next? Like, you can't go to your AD. Okay, well, there's a whole process there. It's called the University Ethics and Compliance Department. You can go and make an independent complaint to this board that's supposed to be separate from the athletic director and the athletic department. And what happens there? Well, the athletic director is meddling in that. They're sending the woman who's investigating, the person who's supposed to be the neutral party, text messages and phone calls at all hours of the day to the fact that her husband's like, she says to her husband, well, I mean, gee, he must be really interested in this. I wonder why, so that process breaks down. And finally, you think, all right, what do I do then? Well, let me go to the president of the university, Jonathan Holloway. He doesn't take your calls, right? He doesn't call you back. And number two, at the end of this, even when we know what happened, he's saying that I'm confident that the university has applied its policies appropriately as it pertains to the program. That's what he said. That's what the president of the university said before the lawyers got there to investigate this, right? Nothing to see here. And you wonder why. This is Rutgers. This reflects poorly on the university. I get it. You don't care about gymnastics, but I mean, I'm sorry. This report was damning on a lot of levels to me, and this is the biggest one for me. Like, you can't tell me with a straight face, when all of this shit happens, that you've done the best job possible to make sure to safeguard your athletes against a toxic environment. You just can't. Yeah,
and look, you can believe that the process was worked out. And what always happens with this is A, you're right. People say, oh, I don't care about gymnastics. And B, there's always victim blaming. Like, oh, were the allegations really true? Are they just making this up because they're disgruntled athletes? Even without arguing the merits of the accusations and all the things that happened, the fact is it doesn't matter what happened because it would not be addressed because the athletic director is in cahoots with the gymnastics coach. And anywhere they go, if they go to him, he's leaking back to her that this group of athletes is coming to him to complain. If they go to University Ethics and Compliance, he is meddling into the investigation. And after being informed of the investigation, breaks protocol and tells her that what the investigation is about. He's allowed to inform her that she's being investigated. Mm-hmm. He's not supposed to give her information about it. He's blabbering on about all of it. He's reaching out to the investigator at non-work hours and sending her emails with the subject line, quite telling. Like he's Elon Musk.
Yeah. You think quite telling? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Quite telling. The fact is that the people at the top are subterfuging, subordinating, whatever the word is. Like they're ruining the process from the beginning, right? So there was no hope, no matter what the accusations are, they were never going to go anywhere, right? And the report goes as far as it goes is saying they should revamp the process for University Ethics and Compliance again, which was their recommendation for doing it at the softball investigation, right? So I guess that's just what we're going to do for the next 50 years. Is every time one of these things happens, it's like, hey, tweak the process just a little bit. Maybe this time it's a poor reflection of the university. And I think Rutgers fans, look, Jonathan Holloway kind of ran Pat Hobbs over the bus and then backed up and then ran him over again in the statement, essentially saying that Pat Hobbs is no longer affiliated with the university. He resigned. That was at the end of his statement to the Board of Governors. But here's the thing. If I'm a Rutgers fan and I see that in the most important year in the history of this athletic department, the lead up to it, where he should be out there asking for NIL donations, doing what he can do, whatever, to bring the infrastructure around the football and basketball program so they can be the most successful they can be in this once-in-a-lifetime season. That really creates your legacy as an athletic director, right? Like this was his opportunity of walking out the big door like I am the greatest athletic director in program history. He's spending a majority of his time either with the gymnastics program in person, with the gymnastics coach, or calling investigators and meddling in an investigation into the gymnastics program. You care about the gymnastics program as a fan? Well, then you should be upset that the athletic director did so much. Like that is the issue. And ultimately, I don't know how much of the blame for all this failure of a season is on Pat Hobbs. I can't quantify that. I think very clearly his distractedness is a nice way to put it, played a big part in that. And ultimately, I feel worse for the gymnasts because the desperation, the despair one must feel that they feel like they have all these bad things happening to them and they try to call out to somebody. Like the one gymnast told me originally, they're screaming, help me, and no one's listening. It must be a bad feeling to know that no one has your back.
Yeah. I'll add this because Brian has been on this story and investigation for a really long time. Steve's been helping and doing a great job, but this was ultimately going to be swept under the carpet. It felt like just another thing. And through dogged reporting and great journalism, the details of this are now finally public. And Rutgers, obviously, because of this report, went out and sought this report. So that's one thing. I know Brian sometimes gets some knocks for being like a Rutgers hater or whatever, but just think about like the service that you provided for these gymnasts and taking care. Like that was a great act of journalism. I want to say that first and foremost.
Absolutely.
Incredible. One thing that you didn't mention, Brian, that I thought was important to rehash. When you first reported this story, there was a part of your report that said that basically said that Salim Beasley went to the Office of Student Conduct claiming that these gymnasts were basically smearing her name and trying to take down the program, tweeting about it, basically making their complaints public, and that Salim Beasley then went to basically take another step to not only to just silence these gymnasts. And that's really the root of this issue. Is these gymnasts were having a horrible time and every step of the way were stymied. And that's the biggest issue for me. And everything that you said, Steve, like the whole order, the process is just fundamentally flawed. And you just think about the girls that, were victimized in this situation.
So where we are now, Salim Beasley has been put on leave. I think made this is probably headed to her being dismissed. I would think there's several reasons that she could be dismissed because of that report. Number one, that she is required to answer questions under her contract, and she refused to do so. I think that would be important, but I think we need to just look at this holistically about what happens to Pat Hobbs' legacy here. And I don't think there's any way to look at this other than disgraceful, the way he exited this place. I mean, and you can look at his accomplishments and things he did and the good he did, but I think this episode erases a lot of that for me. And I'm going to look back on him and his poor judgment, certainly, as a big part of how you judge what he accomplished. Again, like, it's one thing to be incompetent. Julie Herman was incompetent at her job. It's just another thing to use poor judgment in such a way that I don't know, it just reflects poorly on the university. And I think that that's something we're going to have to look back on and say, hey, this is how you judge Pat Hobbs now. So, yeah.
Abusing his power by, again, getting into a relationship, an improper relationship with his subordinate, the idea that they can just do it and get away with it. No one's going to notice. Like, there was an anecdote in the report about multiple high-ranking officials in the athletic department noticing, and two of them confronting him, and him essentially saying, hey, buddy, it takes a lot of balls to tell your boss that you think he has a relationship, but it's not happening. So don't worry about it. Just like the arrogance and the I agree. I mean, it's totally believable. That's kind of the issue here. And I think that the legacy part, yes, the ending was disgraceful. And I think with each passing year, the sense that all the great accomplishments he has lose some luster because his crowning achievement has lost some luster in Steve Peichel. And I think a lot of the building infrastructure that he did was kind of a product of the Big Ten money coming in and the kind of need, right? Like, I don't think, he was a miracle worker for all that. So I think his tenure will be remembered less fondly as the years go on. And certainly the highlight of it was the fact that he left in disgrace. Unfortunately, like a lot of former Rutgers athletic directors, I would like to see the day that Rutgers athletic director, and people thought Pat Hobbs would be this guy, leaves, through their own accord on a high note. Obviously, Pat Hobbs is not that guy.
No, we had one other piece. Pat, you want to say anything?
I was just going to add, just remember the scramble and the whole situation of what happened there at the end as well, right? Like, it was just a complete mess from start to finish. And now the report kind of outlines exactly why. Right. Basically, with his back against the wall, he took every measure to protect himself and his gymnastics coach. So that's what people should probably remember.
And you hope, and we'll eventually have plenty of time to talk about this, and we won't spend a lot of time on it now. As the search for a new athletic director begins, you hope that people are looking at this closely. I'll leave it there for now. All right. We had another report pop, Keith Sargent making a cameo coming out of the woodwork to drop the financial report, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I know people hear the words financial report and they immediately start crafting the emails. So what, but like getting angry about it. And I get it. I got a couple times put out there. I tweeted it, and I immediately, the first response is, yeah, well, so what? It's just such a bad look. You're $70 million in the hole on and nearly matching how much money you lost in the COVID year. I mean, think about that. It's just a bad look. I don't know other way to put it. And this, to me, why I think this is significant now is that because you're eventually going to have to dole out $20 million to athletes. And I have big questions, and I'd love to ask somebody about this, but as we know, it's been 60 days since Ryan Passari has been the interim athletic director. Do the math. We have not been able to ask questions about where this money is coming from. We don't know. So you've got $20 million added to on top of, already a $70 million deficit. I mean, what? And I guess to my people who are saying, so what? I guess to me, what level of deficit is okay to you? Like, even I'm not a guy, like, I don't think Rutgers needs to make money on athletics. I totally get it. I mean, there's values beyond it. It's never going to make money. I accept that. Jonathan Holloway, president, accepted that. But I mean, you're getting to the point where it could be a 9-digit deficit. I mean, is someone going to look at spending? Is someone going to come in and look at the opportunities that are missed to generate more revenue? I mean, why is Rutgers not making more money? You're in the Big Ten now. I mean, why is that not part of this equation? It's just, I just have a lot of questions about this because of what's happening next. Again, like, you're going to have to put resources to athletes to be competitive now. This is what's happening in the future here. And I mean, someone's eventually going to see this number and say this is unacceptable, right?
Well, the thing here, the reason for optimism is that the full 70 million is not included here. They got 45 million from the Big Ten in this case. The thing to me that's concerning is that the more money Rutgers gets, the more it spends, right? It's not like they're being, they're getting more money and they're saying, all right, let's build a base here. They're getting more money. They're spending more on coaching staff hires, football especially, spending a lot of money on coaching staff. Keith Sargent will have a report out eventually, but they spent as much money in the 2023 season on their coaching staff and in the program as Michigan did in 2022 when they went undefeated, won the Big Ten, and went to the CFP. Amazing. Rutgers spent the same amount of money roughly to go 7-6 and go to the Pinstripe Bowl. But maybe you push back some of that money and you use it instead of paying for a guy to analyze every team's third down package, you can give it to, a backup running back or whatever. Like the allocation of resources could be different. But the thing is, Rutgers is getting $28.5 million in subsidies between student fees, state funding, federal funding that's going directly, or university funding going directly into the athletic department. 30 million almost, and you're now 70 million in the hole, right? And the money part, they're only getting, they set a record low in contributions, donations they received last year, 6 million. This year, they've gotten to 8 million, right? Which is nothing. It's nothing as far as donations, right? And I understand the donations are stretched out between NIL now, but the fact is they never had a big donor base to begin with. Ticket sales are really low, right? Even the money they make from parking, despite the fact they charge you an arm and a leg to park at the rack, is still not that much money. So clearly the thing is this. They're not making enough money, right, outside of the Big Ten media rights deal that's coming. And they spend it like insanely. They just throw the money around, right? Which, again, to our point where we're supposed to just accept that a 7-6 football season with the easiest schedule of all time is acceptable when you're spending this much money. I don't square that away. I can't square that away.
Yeah, in terms of the spending, it's just like the bigger picture. What is your expectation for a university and its athletics department? What role does athletics play in the big picture of your state product? Right, when your athletic director is a political figure, what role does that impact? How does taxpayer money relate to all this? Like, those are the big picture questions that you have to ask yourself as a Rutgers fan. Do you, as a New Jerseyan, do you support this? Right? Like, there are just a lot of things, a lot of different ways to look at it, and it's just. You could do it one way or the other. Yeah.
I get it. Like, I understand. And I like, again, like, I'm not, and please, but people are going to say this and think that, oh, you've been complaining about this forever. I'm not. In fact, I remember early on in my career about this, like I like a throwaway line in some column about how much money they were spending on something. I forget what it was. And someone said to me, well, you can judge them for winning or you could judge them for spending, like you for losing or spending, like one or the other. And like, that's a good point. Like, if you're not doing everything you can to win, then okay, yeah. So it's not. So eventually, I just stopped worrying about it. But you just see something like this, and your eyes just go, what? it's kind of good, and I get it. Like, window on university, all these things. We did the Big Ten series. We know how valuable it is. To me, it's just pretty jarring that they're not capitalizing on that.
And context is important for of course, right? They were still 8th in the Big Ten in terms of teams that had to, disclose their spending. So, right, it's not like they're 18th out of 18th, right? Like, Rutgers is really right there with everyone else. So the putting everything on the line is there. If you're a Rutgers fan, you should be like, that's great. Like, yeah. Right. You probably look at that report and like, oh, wow, Rutgers is as bought into athletics as Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State.
That is one reading of it. That's a great point. It's a one reading of it. Absolutely.
That is a good way to look at it. And look, the coaching salaries, as I mentioned, right? Them spending that much money is why Kirk Shiraka is back for another year and why Joe Harris-Simiak stayed and all these things, right? Like, there is some benefit to that. But at some point, it's going to have to reduce in some production. Obviously, the Michigan angle, Michigan's been spending that kind of money for decades, whereas Rutgers is just now starting to spend the money. You shouldn't expect immediate dividends. I think that's fair to say. But at some point, if you're going to be spending $60 million a year on your football program, you like to get more than one win every $10 million you spend. So I think there's big picture questions, as you said, about how this will result in revenue sharing. I think that maybe there's some fat to cut all over the place, not just football and coaching staffs, but like, you've seen multiple athletic departments kind of cut their athletic departments in half, essentially, like lay people off. And I'm not suggesting that they should do that. I'm just saying that could be the way we're going, whether it's doing that, whether it's cutting sports. it just feels like it's unsustainable for them to keep spending this much money and not make it back, even when they're getting another $30 million in Big Ten revenue next year. There's got to be some. You can't be in a $70 million deficit every year, right? At least I think you can, right?
We're gonna find out. All right, enough on the spending stuff. All right, we've been talking some unhappy things. I want to do a happy story, Pat, and it's your story on Nick Suriano, which is one of my favorites that we've had in a long time. One of my favorite athletes, a guy I didn't cover a lot, but again, like a source of I don't know how else to put it. Great curiosity about him. Pat, you found him on Muscle Beach in California when we were out there for the USC trip, publishing the story now. So again, before the fires, and people want to talk about the LA fires. And I thought you just captured what's going on with this kid's life now. Give me a sense. I mean, what was that like meeting up with him, the whole thing? How'd it come down?
So Nick Soriano's reputation has always been, from day one that I've been following his career as a high school athlete at Bergen Catholic, one of the greatest scholastic high school athletes to ever come out of New Jersey, right? A 4-time state champion, 159-0 in his career, and was just as dedicated and as different as an athlete, as a young kid, than any person I've ever been around in my life, right? Just so driven, so determined, and really just had, and always embodied that championship mentality in a sport like wrestling. That's just incredible. So it was always a different kind of person. And when his whole career has just been and kind of full of curiosity and speculation, and wrestled at 3 different colleges, won 2 national titles, but there were always big question marks along the way. And now the big part of the story was really what happened to him chasing Olympic glory, right? He was wrestling the best he's ever wrestled in his life in 2020 and 2021, right as the pandemic hit. And the Tokyo Games were pushed back a year. In 2021, he's at the Olympic trials. He's one of the best guys in the bracket. Everyone's picking him to win. And he tests positive for COVID and is kicked out of the tournament. And you want to talk about heartbreak. And after spending every minute of your life dedicated to your craft, what happens? That's what happened in this. That's why the story became, he's searching for what comes next, right? He's had some injuries and he's been doing this his whole life. Like, at what point can you pursue this and search? So basically it becomes what he's searching for, his life message and his life meaning. And he's out in California now. It's experiential and existential, right? He's all about spirituality and messaging, and does really not intensive, but like he's a deep thinker, and that kind of plays into all this. And he's just a curious athlete, and fascinating. So, I didn't find him in Venice, California. I asked him if we could meet up for the story, and he spent a good amount of time with me, showing me around and explaining what's going on in his life. So Nick Suriano will always be a guy that I've been around a lot in my life, and so just really fascinating. And I'm thankful that he provided the time that he did.
You can put it in your own gratitude journal.
Yeah, exactly.
Like he has. And I'd say just because I think this is why I love stories like this. I thought he was like a one-dimensional dude, like, and to see all this sort of like these layering to him, pretty cool. Yeah.
I've always found him to be the most interesting guy that has ever run through it. Even when he was here, like, it was hard to really just pin him down as like you never knew what was happening with Nick Suriano, right? And I think Pat did a great job of just getting into his mind for a little bit. I don't know how long you want to live in the mind of Nick Suriano. I think a 1,600 word story is just the perfect amount, because anymore I'm going to start, but I thought it was a perfect, and that was, like, it was really interesting. Like you mentioned, his long hair now, like, he used to be a guy who was buzz cut, like 5,000 pushups a day, like laser focus on his goal. And now he seems just kind of like a surfer bro. I don't know if he surfs, but he seems like he has that surfer bro kind of spiritual
and existential and philosophical, right? Like, these are like deeper meanings and connections to the world and things like that. Very California, if you're trying to get out of New Jersey. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we all can agree that at some point as young men, we had that point in our life where we searched for life's meaning, but his feels like, much like everything else in his life, turned up to 1,000, right? Like, just everything is so much more intense with him. And I wonder, like, not to kind of stereotype the guy, is he like a Joe Rogan listener? He feels like the kind of guy who would get really, really into Joe Rogan at one point in his life.
That one, I can't say I stumbled upon that one for sure, but yeah, I don't know.
And you're right. I tell you, I look searching for a life meeting. Oh, right about these days as I stare down the barrel of another disappointing Rutgers season. I'm sure a lot of people who are searching for a life meaning. What am I doing?
Let's talk about guys that have accomplished things in their like.
About that,
right? A guy that
mm-hmm.
didn't have the greatest ending at Penn State, broke his ankle, robbed him of a chance to win a national title as a freshman,
mm-hmm.
decided, hey, I'm going to come back to Rutgers and do it for New Jersey, and did it, right? No matter how it ended, provided Rutgers and anyone who followed wrestling one of the greatest nights this state has ever seen. So,
yeah. Pat, you touched on it. It sounds like he is considering trying to go to the Olympics in 26.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's still training. He had to take some time off he had a fracture in his back that he claims that, limited him in the lead up to the last Olympic trials when he lost to Dayton Fix, an old rival. And that cost him some time. So he's been really a big part of this California experience is rehabilitation and finding himself like from a physical, and how does the stress of the sport relate to this and that, and the healing. One of his big words is healing, physically, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah. I hope that ends well.
And the Olympics are in Los Angeles. That's his other thing, right? That's a required reason why he's there.
It's just so hard, and it's not going to get easier. Hard enough to make it to begin with in that sport. And it's just
there are 6 spots, maybe
6 spots. All right. Good job on that again. What else do we got? Oh, wait, I have National Natty. Ohio State. Let's talk about that really quick, because that's relevant to Rutgers. The Big Ten is now, even Paul Feinbaum going on the radio and the SEC country saying it's the Big Ten's world college football. Hey, give Ohio State a lot of credit. It's hard to argue that you can't argue. They are the best team in college football, the best program in college football. They might have won the most impressive national championship in college football history.
They were always the best team in the sport, right? They spent $20.5 million on their freaking roster, and they had they have a generational wide receiver and, like great pass rushers. Like they should have won the national title. I think the biggest revelation to me is, where was this freaking team all along? Where was this team when they were in a dogfight with Nebraska? Where was this team?
Sound like a bitter Ohio State fan. Some guy in Columbus who's parked outside Ryan Day's house with a spray paint can after the Michigan game.
Which, by the way, I think I mentioned this on the pod before. Whenever they lose, they post a photo of Ryan Day with his address on it. I think it's the funniest thing of all. I mean, clearly he lives in a gated community and he's protected, which is why it's funny. But anyway, that's how you know that they're dedicated fan base. But it's true. Yeah. How do you lose 13-10 to Michigan when you're dominating these teams? Like Notre Dame had no prayer, right? That bomb to Jeremiah Smith.
To your point, though, this is what the college football is going to become more like the NFL, where you could lose a game. It's like the Chiefs lose games, and like they're the best. There's not going to be like this. Everyone's got to go 16-0 anymore. This is kind of going to be the new thing with college football,
right? It's maybe the most impressive. I don't want to say it's one of the most impressive national. I don't think it is, but it was the first year of the 12-team playoff, and that was always going to add a new wrinkle to the sport and the landscape. What was crazy about the Ohio State experience was the upfront, the decision to be upfront from Ryan Day from the beginning to say, we're going all in. We put out all this money to bring in the best players, right? That in itself opened itself up to this new world of criticism where outside perception, what does it actually mean to a program? Right? Like who's listening? What's the conversation? Like, it's just the fact that Ryan Day went from being fired, I don't know, to now, right, a mythical person of interest is fascinating, and it just speaks to like everything that is college sports, right? Why did you used to watch college football? Because right, your good old university played the other good old university, and it was equal playing field. Well, no, now it's the team that paid the most money won the national championship, and we're surprised. The LA Dodgers won the World Series because they paid the best players. Whoa, are we surprised? Right? Like, that's tradition. Sucks.
It's the Dodger blue, Pat. Come on. The Buckeyes. They put on the helmet. Buckeyes. That's why they won. Woody Hayes.
Right. Cody Simon of St. Peter's Prep was the defensive MVP.
Yeah. There you go.
Look, I think
It's wild.
the argument people are making now between the current way and the old way, right? Like Ryan Day was John Cooper, like the worst coach in Ohio State history, modern history, because he would have these great teams. They'd be 11-0, and then they'd always shit the bed against Michigan and wouldn't play for a national championship, right? That was Ryan Day in every other year other than this year. Because if he had lost to Michigan last year, been 2 losses, he wouldn't even sniff the 14 playoff. He would have been fired and he would have been let go. So in a way, the 12-team playoff rewards underachievers, because that Ohio State team was an underachiever for the regular season. There's no doubt about it. Maybe the biggest underachiever. So this, in a way, saves it. I don't know if it devalues the national championship. I don't know if I want to go that far, but I do think it takes away some of the, like when a team like 0-1 Miami just barrels through teams, is undefeated, 13-0, beats everyone. Like, that is an impressive run. Auburn and with Cam Newton. Like, this feels like, a team that got a second chance. They literally got a second chance against the first team that beat him in Oregon, right? Oregon beats them in Oregon. Then they get to play them again and destroy them.
Right. Well, I mean, line up who 0-1 Miami beat. I mean, look, still, all that said,
my point is that
Rutgers, Greg Schiano's first year.
I was at that game, I believe.
My point is that Ohio State sleepwalked its way through the regular season and was still able to come around. And, this is why a playoff system is not particularly my favorite way to determine a champion, because really all you have to do is qualify, right? And so even if you play bad a couple times and you qualify, you just have to be the best team in there. And it doesn't reward the consistency that college football used to. You used to have to be the consistent best team every week. You win every game. And eventually, after 13 games, there's a big enough sample size, you're the best team in the country. This year, you just have to be one of the 12 best. You get in the field, and maybe you're Penn State and you get the easiest draw known to man. Maybe you're Ohio State and you just barrel through good teams because you have $20.5 million on your roster and you're just better than everyone else. So, and listen, Rutgers is going to go play the national champion for the second year in a row, but this year they're going to Ohio State. So,
Indeed. All right. Anything else we have to talk about here?
Notre Dame, the perennial loser. This is what, 30 years in a row they don't win a title?
We didn't get any questions from the Discord, as usual. Let me just double check, because I asked, and
well, there was one question, the same question. What's happening with the AD and the president? And we have the same answer.
We have no idea. Right. Yeah. Okay.
The AD, talk about timeline, like 160 days since Ryan Spessari talked. It's been 50 days, I think, today, since the defensive coordinator job was opened at Rutgers. And there has not been any movement, at least publicly, in that entire situation. I think we're going to get to spring camp and just show up in practice and say, oh, look, there's whoever is the DC at the practice. I think that's kind of what's going to happen at this point.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's some people yelling about a headline that AI wrote in the Discord. Yeah, I'll have to get in there and see what that's all about. But that's all the time we have for the show. We'll be back. I'll be there. You going, Pat? Are you going to a Saturday's game at the Garden or no?
TBD.
All right. Well, Brian
TBD.
and I definitely will be there, and we'll be back on Monday, I guess, or early next week to discuss it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.